do that, I'm just going to point out the new Targa Miata Kojeki flow-formed wheels are here and they're shipping. So we do have a limited number of these things. If you are looking for a wheel built specifically for the Miata, we have them for the NA, the NB, the NC, and the ND, all generations. They'll fit the Fiat, they'll fit anything else with a 4x100 pattern on the right offset, that sort of thing. But these things are in stock and shipping now, so pretty cool too. Oops. That's the color of the bronze. We get a lot of questions about what the bronze looks like. It's a really nice color in person. It's a hard color to photograph because it's so reflective, so shiny. But yeah, we're really happy with that. I've seen pictures of it on a black RF and whoa, that looked great. So there we go. Today I'm going to talk about the Targa Miata Stradale, as I'm calling it. Basically the street version of the Targa Miata. And I'll give you a little background. We do have 2 videos on our YouTube channel on this already, showing the initial thoughts, showing a sort of midway stage from a few months ago. The Targa Miata is a car that I built for the Targa Newfoundland back in 2008. That's the first time it raced. I started building it in 2006. And after the Targa Newfoundland in 2008, it did very well there. It was used as an R&D car, a fun car, a really fun car. And then we pulled out the 4-cylinder, dropped in a V8, took it back to Targa Newfoundland for 2011, put in a bigger V8, and then basically it turned into an R&D car. So a lot of Targa Miata's maximum performance products were torture tested on this particular car. Brake systems, a lot of brake systems, suspension systems, several generations of suspension systems, wheels, all sorts of stuff were tested on this car. It's sort of moved out of that range of it, or that part of its lifespan at this point. It's we have other dedicated cars used for testing more normal products, turbo kits. We can't test turbo kits on this thing. It's a 6.2 liter V8. Obviously, there's not a lot of call for Miata specific turbo kits for 6.2 liter V8s. So it was just being used for track days and not that many track days. So I decided, what the heck, I'm going to have some fun with it. I had to take the front half of the cage out anyway for an upgrade. So I decided that while the front half of the cage was out, I would turn it into a street car for a while, because it's always been registered. That's the nice thing about a rally car, is they're always street cars. So it's always been registered, it's always been road legal. And so I figured, what the heck, let's have some fun. So that's the history of it. The last time that you saw this car, the last time that I did an update on this car, it was stripped down. The interior was stripped out. I had pulled out the engine, but put it back in by that point with some new heat shielding in the tunnel to try to keep the sound down, and also to just make sure that all of the underneath, everything, you know, all the mechanicals, the suspension pickup points and everything were in good shape. They were, with a couple of things. I had to fix a couple of problems. But since then, I've mostly been working on the interior. And so I thought I'd invite you all in here and have a look. It's basically done. Let's have a look over here and see what's going on. And I would like to point out, if you have questions, please put them in the comments. If you're watching on Facebook, obviously, we will answer them live. If you're watching on YouTube sometime in 2032 after the apocalypse, well, we will try our best to answer them in the comments as well. But please ask as many questions as you like, give suggestions, whatever. It's always fun to hear different ideas on what you can do. So here we go. This car had a half dashboard from the start. I always did have it amputated, but it had a switch panel here. And I decided for street use, I wanted to go to a minimalist interior. I've always been drawn to what is the minimum you can, what's the most you can do with the least amount of stuff. And in this car, I decided to take it to an extreme. The most obvious thing is the tombstone has been deleted, and a piece of foam has been, for the crash pad, has been put in there, and then the entire thing wrapped in blue suede. And I'll go a little more detail in what's been in the wrapping process there. The door panels have been redone. They are aluminum, 25 thousandths of an inch, in case you're wondering. I forget what that gauge is, but it's 0.025. And then painted white, and again, the upper door pad also done in suede. I didn't really need to do it in blue suede. I was going to do it in black originally. In the last update, the plan was always to do it in black. And then I decided, what the heck? What this interior needs is one strong accent. It needs one thing to draw your attention away from the fact that the floor has been hammered back into a shape with a sledgehammer, and that there's multiple holes in the floor, and that, it's got very rough looking heat shielding on the tunnel, and it's had switches added and things taken away. And this has been a working car for 13 years, it shows it. So there you go. The big blue stripe is there to distract you. And that, what Travis is zooming in on right now, that's the Sea Giant Corabla computer. That's the rally computer that we used when we were running in the Targa Newfoundland. And I had to leave it there as a nod to the car's history. I don't really need it anymore. We're not really planning on doing a lot of timed rally stages, but it was there. I decided I'd leave it there because, you know, this thing was built as a rally car. That's part of the fun of the whole thing. Those with sharp eyes will notice that there is very little instrumentation outside of the stock instrumentation. For example, there's nothing for the four-way flashers. Travis, you might have to come around this side for this one. So the four-way flashers, I put a little magic switch right there, hidden underneath the steering column. And also the steering column, those with sharp eyes will notice this is out of a non-airbag car. It's got these old school switches that I like the looks of much better. And they feel better to me too because they're designed to take the full electrical load of the various systems that are on them. So the various contacts are much beefier. Required changing the steering column. I've talked a little bit about this in the past. I was able to figure out the wiring so I didn't have to change the wiper motor. The Canadian or the non-airbag wiper motor worked on a switch positive. The American ones work on switch negative. I was able to reverse the logic, get that working properly. So we have that. Also, this is a low oil pressure light. There we go. I wanted to have one because that's important, obviously, but I also wanted it to be fairly subtle. What you just heard beep there was the audio system coming online. It does have audio. I talked a little bit about this last time as well, but here's the final implementation. There's the audio system right there. I put it in the door. This is basically a Bluetooth receiver embedded in the door. And with that, I can pair it to my phone or my tablet or whatever. And so it just simply runs to an amplifier that's hiding underneath the dashboard. And that's all it does. It basically takes the Bluetooth signal, amplifies it, puts it out 2 speakers, done. This is a loud car. There's only so much you can do for audio quality. But the reason I like it is because it's so minimalist, it's so subtle that that you don't see it, you don't notice it's there, because nothing dates a car worse than an out-of-date radio. You know, you look at it, you see that, and you say, oh, that's so 5 years ago, or it's got a CD player in it, it's got an 8-track or cassette, or, you know, it's the DVD screen that pops out is 4:3 instead of widescreen, whatever. Now it's just a knob. And this is actually quite easy to reach when you're sitting in the car. The other switch is here, that's the power window switch. I did the same sort of thing. The switches for the windows are on the actual door. It makes the wiring easy, but it also keeps everything as clean as possible. And here's kind of a fun thing I did as well. These door cards, being only 25 thousandths of an inch thick, are considerably thinner than the factory door cards. So there was a gap around these this door furniture, as you might call it. So I needed a spacer. And I'll show you the templates for that. Travis, I'm going to lean over you for a second. So I mocked up, I've got a laser cutter. I mocked up some little spacers. These are made out of a hardboard. It's a great prototyping material. It cuts just like acrylic. And came up with the exact shape for what I needed. The 2 various little pads. But then I realized I have acrylic. I've got all sorts of colors, but more importantly, I have orangish red and I have blue. So it was kind of a no-brainer at that point. I decided to cut out a couple of ones in color, put them in there. It's kind of goofy. It's kind of fun. I may change them out with black later, depending how I end up feeling about them. But it's just it's just a nice little touch that I like it. What the heck? I'm not going to put lights behind them. These aren't going to glow at night. So there's that. I did put a light under the dash. So there's an LED underneath the dashboard shooting forward just to light up the wheel well, or the footwells, because that does make the interior feel bigger. Just kind of makes it feel a little bit lighter, a little bit larger. And I could fire the car up, but it's been turned on and off so many times, it hasn't been run properly for a while. I think it's got some foul plugs. It sounds a little cranky. Another little touch I did, I'll show this to you. my horn button delete. That is legit carbon fiber. And I laser engraved the Martini logo in it just for fun. I mean, I could put a horn in this thing. I think it's actually got a horn in it. The wire's down there. But when you've got a carbon fiber horn button delete, you've got to use a carbon fiber horn button delete, don't you? Do you have any questions yet, Travis?
I have not seen any.
No questions. Okay, let me check my notes. While we're in the interior, I'll talk a little bit more about the door cards because I know people love door cards. They are held in. I put riv nuts in the door where most of, not all, but most of the factory snaps go. So they're very well held into place with those various screws. Easy to take on and off too. Obviously there's no chance of breaking this like you have with a factory door card. And they are screwed together here. I've got a little bit of sound deadening material on the back side, just a little square about this big of Cool It, which deadens it a little bit and keeps it from sounding rattly. I also put, I think you were zooming in on this earlier, Travis. I also put some pads underneath the driver and passenger seats. There's 1 millimeter thick, 40 thousandths thick aluminum plate underneath that. And then I put down some skateboard grip tape on top of it to keep my feet from sliding around because that's no fun. This floor has been so hammered, so many things have been screwed into it and taken off it before that there's no way I could put the grip tape right on the floor. I had no options. I had to do something. Okay. No questions, huh? All right. Oil light, hazard switch. Okay, some of the questions that we've had, and these are questions that we're sending ahead of time. Again, if you have questions, please hit us up in the comments right now. One of the things you might notice if you're a real Miata nerd is that the stuff that's on the door isn't one that was found in nature. The speaker cover is off a 1.6. The door pull is off a 95 through 90, 94 through 95, I think, as they use those, as opposed to like the armrest style. I decided to go with that style because it gave me something to hang on to. I thought it suited the sort of racy version of the door a little bit. I might replace it with a leather strap. I don't think I need an armrest in this sort of car, but I did mess around with bits and pieces because that's, I've got a lot of bits and pieces sitting around here to play with. Do we have a question, Travis?
Someone is asking about the shift light.
The shift light. The shift light that's in there is a rev light, which was a part that we found a stash of them in a warehouse. They were out of production. Fly Miata found a stash of them in a warehouse and sold a bunch of them. They were not the most reliable thing. There were some failure rates on them. I can see why they went out of production, but that's what it is. It's a sequential LED tack. I've got it set up to, go bright red at certain shift points, that sort of thing. Very, very useful on the track. We do sell a version of one now called a Intellitech Shift I Plus or something. It's got some techie name, but I really like them. This particular one has been working fine for me for, 13, 14 years now, but that's what it is. Travis, another question.
Any plans to change the seats?
Any plans to change the seats? So the seats are Corbeau FX1 Pros. I had to do a lot of work to get them in there, especially to get my side down as low as possible. The factory seat mounts are gone. I had to hammer the tunnel a little bit. I had to actually modify the seats themselves. But because of all that work, this car fits me like it was built for me, because it was built for me, and they're very, very comfortable. And one of the reasons they're comfortable is because I replaced the pads with Confor memory foam. It's a blue memory foam. It's a very, very high density memory foam. This is sold by Pegasus Racing as Backsaver foam, or you can get it from Confor. It's like a medical grade. The blue is, I think, the medium hardness. But before I did this, these seats were comfortable for about a half hour. After doing it, they were comfortable for a week of 13-hour days. So there's no reason to change the seats. I find them very, very comfortable. They are bolted in on the back. They're nice and solid. They're not going anywhere. Travis, another question.
Yes, someone's asking specifically what LEDs have you put in the interior?
Okay, the question is specifically what LEDs have I put in the interior? Honestly, the one that is underneath the dashboard is whatever I found. It's an LED chip-on-board strip. I could dig it out, but it's in the middle of the chaos behind me. It's off Amazon. It's one of those things I bought because they're kind of handy to have around. The LED here is a 3/4 inch truck clearance light, the sort that you put down the side of your trailer so you know where the side of your trailer is at night. And I actually fogged it with some black paint so it didn't look bright red all the time. And those are the only 2 LEDs in the interior. Everything else is effectively stock lighting. Other than the Caralba, which has its own. It's got its own old school charm. If you watch WRC, you will notice that this is what the WRC guys use. These are made in Sweden. They are the best rally computers. It's good for something like 10 centimeters of accuracy. But that thing is awesome. It's not telling us anything useful right now. I just set it up so it would make pretty lights. Another thing that I've done to this car, and I pointed this out in a previous thing, this car is basically built out of salvage parts. I got it as a bare tub, and all of the doors and the hood and the trunk lid and everything like that, they all came off different cars. There's something like 11 different colors of factory paint underneath this Martini livery. And I kept a bunch of the factory nuts and bolts, or factory nuts and bolts that were painted in factory colors. So you can see some of them here. There's Smurf blue, there's, what's it called, Sunburst, yellow, there's classic red, there's British Racing green, there's a red one in there. Every visible nut and bolt that I could use a colored one for, I did. And it's just kind of fun. It's just a little nod to the car's history. Travis, we have a question.
Any plans for putting defrost or an HVAC back in?
So the question is, are there any plans for defrost or HVAC? And at some point, yes, I would like to do that. Defrost is rarely needed around here, just with our particular climate. It's not, we don't get as much of a problem with it as you do with some of the more humid climates. I would like to come up with something. I'd like to get air conditioning in this thing because it's a hot car. We live in a hot place. But I need to find a way to package it. And more importantly, I wanted this car to get off the lift. I wanted to get to the point where I could get it out and drive it and just sort of finish it in one point, or at one stage. And then if I come up with a good solution for HVAC, because I'm fairly space constrained. By losing the bottom half of that dashboard, I only have about this much height to play with. I'm fairly space constrained, so there's a limit to what I can do for air conditioning. I can't use the factory stuff because the dashboard's gone, but also there's a bunch of the pass-throughs got co-opted for use for wiring harnesses and stuff like that, so maybe someday. I'll show you another project I'm working on. I'll ask a couple of the other questions that we've come up with here. What transmission and drivetrain setup? It's running a LS 376 525 crate engine. It's basically a 525 horsepower crate engine, 6.2 liter LS3. On the dyno, it pulls 466 at the wheels on our dyno. It's running a Tremec T56 Magnum transmission. The V8 Roadster is stage 3 or G3, I think they call it, rear end. It's a bomb-proof drivetrain setup. It's been absolutely. You can do terrible, terrible things to it. It just goes and goes and goes, stays cool on the track, that sort of thing. It weighs, I haven't weighed it since I took the front half of the cage out. So right now, assuming I took out, what do you think, 30 pounds of tubing? It'll be under 2,400 right now. And the weight balance is probably better than Mazda speed, lighter than Mazda speed. So yeah, about 2,300 pounds as it sits right now with the hardtop on, because of course it runs a hardtop all the time. Because, well, there's no other top on it. And it still has the ability to run the active aero that I've talked about in the past. I can still bolt the wing on in no time flat. This can be turned back into, excuse me, this can be turned back into a full-on track car very, very quickly, with the exception of, obviously, it doesn't have the front half of the cage, so it's a track day car, obviously not built for wheel-to-wheel, but it was never intended to be wheel-to-wheel car. Do we have a question there, Travis?
Your microphone.
Oh, sorry, my microphone has fallen down. There we go. Yeah, so that's what a Targa Miata is. How much compression and droop travel does the car have? One of the questions we had was actually about, am I going to do a safari on this thing? And I got to tell you, compared to the way this thing has been during its track days, it is in safari mode right now. I used to have to lift it to get it into the trailer. It is set up for good street height right now, which is actually close to where it was during the Targa Newfoundland. I can lift it up another couple of inches if I want to. It has lots of droop travel. It's running Fox Racing, the Fly Miata Fox Racing suspension. So obviously I have quite a bit of droop that is available to me. Right now it's still running its track spring rate, which is a 750 front, and I forget on the back. I think it might be a 600 on the back right now. I've been messing with the rears, so I don't remember what they are. It's running a lot of spring rate, but it's still surprisingly comfortable. We'll see. It'll be a test. There's snow on the ground outside, so obviously I'm not going to be testing it right away. We had another question about how effective my heat control modifications were to the transmission tunnel. Got to tell you right now, a little bit of heat coming through the tunnel would probably be fairly welcome, so it's not really a good time to test that particular question. So here's the material I used for the dash. My coworker Mike Usry he has a history as an upholsterer. He's still sort of I guess he's not getting paid for it, so maybe he's an amateur upholsterer. He's an upholsterer on the side, and he came over and helped me put this stuff on, which was quite an education. If you ever have a chance to work with someone who knows how to do this stuff, it's really interesting. You know, you can watch a YouTube video and get the basics, but there's no substitute for doing it and doing it and doing it. There's lots of little tricks, like watching a plasterer or, anybody who works in a trade and has lots of experience in that trade. You get that same sort of thing with upholstery. There's lots of tricks. Anyhow, this is the stuff. It's actually a headliner material. It's got a small foam backing on the back, and that actually allowed us to get over some of the imperfections that were on the dashboard, even after all the work I did to fit it together. So there we go. This stuff is 60 inches wide. Here's the roll. We didn't use very much of it. It's about $20 a yard, and I forgot it was 5 feet wide, so I bought 30 square feet of the stuff. So I could probably cover most of the entire car in suede if I wanted to. That is not planned. It'd be hard to wash. Travis, you have a question?
Someone's asking what the extra knobs and switches on the tunnel are for.
Extra knobs and switches on the tunnel. Okay, so there's not that many, but this is the main cutoff switch. There we go. Battery is now disconnected. And that'll wake up the Giant when I turn that back on again. This is brake bias. This allows me to adjust the front rear brake distribution for different. That's especially useful on a rally because, of course, as the temperatures change, as the climate, the weather changes, as your grip levels change, your ideal front to rear balance changes as well. So that allows me to change it as I'm driving. And that is the extent. Oh, and I have a thing to pop open the gas tank. And that is the extent of my switches on the interior. I don't have a headlight raise switch anymore. If I need to raise the headlights to do some work on them, I just turn off the master power and then turn them up with the little knob. I don't really have a reason to pop the headlights up without using them. So they will still do this for the flash to pass. But yeah, I decided to delete that. It was a real interesting test on this car to sit down and say, what do I really need? What is nice to have? What do I have to have? What do I not need at all? I don't need AM/FM radio, so I don't need AM/FM radio control stuff. I don't really need the ability to put the headlights up with, independent of everything else. So I don't need that switch anymore. So I just hot wired that into place. I do need 4-way flashers. So that's why these were added on here. I do need an oil light. So that's why that was added in there. So it's an interesting exercise. It's not something you do instantly. It's something you work on, you go back to, you think about, you sit in the car, you poke at stuff, and you go back and round and around and around and around until you come up with, okay, this is what I like, this is what I need. Turn that off again. All right, so now I'll finally show you that other stuff I've been talking about. This is, I'm gonna come over this side, Travis, if you got some room. This is an upcoming project I've got. I've mentioned in the past, this car doesn't have a functioning speedometer. It's got an extremely accurate rally computer, so I can use that, but it doesn't really have a sort of old school needle on a stick swinging around telling me how fast I'm going, because it has a dashboard out of a 1.6, even though it's technically, I think, a 95R. But it's an NA dashboard, and they had a mechanical cable-driven speedometer. The T56 transmission has an electric speedometer output, and I never bothered converting those to work together because if I was going too fast, my navigator could tell me, and when it was a track car, I don't need to know how fast I'm going. I just need to know how many RPM I'm running. So it doesn't have a working speedometer, and my original thought was it doesn't take much to put one of these in an NA dash. You just have to basically swap these two holes over, and then it bolts in. Then it's just a matter of a little bit of wiring. That's a big deal. But I got playing around some other projects, and I started playing with stepper motor driven gauges. And I've what I'm working on is trying to come up with effectively an analog race dash. So instead of a race dash being a bunch of LCD displays that can be configured to pretend to be real gauges, this will actually have legitimate gauges in here. It's not up and running right now, so I'm just moving this around by hand. Whee! But I have stepper motor driven gauges. I can have it display whatever it wants to. That means I can calibrate it, obviously. I can do all sorts of tricks. I can do a little sweep when it turns on, just because you got to, actually that's for calibration for stepper motors. I'm thinking about embedding some LEDs behind it that I can use as a variable red line. So when the engine's cold, it shows a red line of say 3,500, 4,000, whatever. Then it gradually moves up, like an E39 M5, to pick a random example. I think that's where those were introduced. It will allow me to go into error conditions, for example. I could have the LEDs behind the speedo or the tachometer work as a rev light sort of deal. I could have them all flash red when it's time to shift. I could have them just go completely berserk when there's some sort of error conditions, such as low oil pressure or something else going out of range, a coolant temperature range. I'm still playing with the ideas, but I think it's going to be interesting to have, this is being run by a Raspberry Pi, have that thing control the dashboard, and effectively, like I said, make an analog race dash. So I'm having some fun playing with that. This is what I do on like a Thursday evening when I'm done with work, is I go and I start playing around with programming for this. The cool thing about using the Pi instead of something like an Arduino is that I can also do other stuff with it. For example, the Pi could be used for a dash cam to monitor all the time. This is a Pi 4. I'll probably use a 3 just because it's needs a little bit less power, but I could use it for streaming for music. I could put a music library, for a few gigabytes or terabytes of music on this thing and have it stream through the system. I've got a lot of different options because of this guy. I'm even thinking if I do HVAC, I could do an auto HVAC setup where it knows how hot or how cool I want the temperature to be, and it runs the various heaters and coolers for me. The shop actually runs auto HVAC running off a Pi. It controls the environment for both the humidity and the temperature. So that's stuff I put together here. So there you go. This is a future project. There will be more on this. It's not something Fly Miata is planning on selling. This is very much a hobbyist thing, but it's going to be kind of fun to play with. Do you have any questions over there, Travis? Nope. Okay. I think I have covered all of the questions that came in here. Not many questions. I got to tell you guys, I was hoping for more. Yeah. If you do have any questions and you're not watching this live, please do throw them in the comment on YouTube or in Facebook. We will answer them. We have lots of videos of this car out in its natural element running around on the track. There's also actually a movie documentary called Racing the Rock, which documents this car and its sister, a supercharged NC, taking on the 2011 Targa Newfoundland. And it's beautifully shot. Our friend Adam Costa put that together, and it is now available for free on YouTube. Again, Racing the Rock. We'll probably put a link in the description for this video, might as well. But it's a fun watch. It's, an hour and a half or so. And I got to say that we did not do this on purpose, but we gave Adam some fantastic plot twists, shall we say. There's the plot, if we had come up with this ahead of time, it would have seemed far-fetched. As it was a pretty good plot, but also it's got lots of great